Big names in the Destiny 2 community lately have been pressing the issue on whether or not sunsetting should be brought back to Destiny. For those of us who have taken the time to collect it, Destiny currently offers an insanely powerful arsenal to players, often leading to situations where a new weapon releases and isn't even touched because it's just not as good as what's already available. The lack of interest in new weapons has led many players back to the idea that sunsetting was actually a good thing. Is this truly the case? I want to talk a little bit about that because I'm not convinced. Coming from a 35 subscriber YouTuber, here's my 2 cents that quite literally nobody asked for. Sunsetting was and always will be bad and is simply the lazy solution towards developing a live service game. When you sunset a weapon, you're telling your players that this exact weapon is not going to be available to use moving forward. This essentially creates a void in the weapon space that needs to be filled. So, what does it get filled by? More often than not, it's usually something almost identical to what was lost. What is the point in removing a weapon if it is only going to be copy-pasted with a new name and maybe a slightly different look? It's a pointless hamster wheel of a grind that is incredibly disrespectful to player time. The counter-argument to this is that sunsetting allows Bungie to implement incredibly powerful weapons as they will only be available for a limited amount of time. My counter-argument to that is that Bungie has had the chance to do this, and only a very select few of weapons actually followed this idea. It's abundantly clear that Bungie used sunsetting as a cheap way of keeping the weapons chase interesting, quote unquote. I also want to shoot down this weird revisionism that seems to be going around. When sunsetting was here, it was hated by literally everybody. When it was announced that sunsetting was going to be going away, it was universally praised. To turn around and say that it wasn't bad and is actually a good thing is so dishonest and lazy. Here are some other solutions that can potentially solve this issue. Thank you for tuning back in. First and most obvious, all it takes for weapons to move up or down in the meta is a rebalancing of perks. I am far from a weapons sandbox analyst, and I could not say the first thing about what would be good or bad for the sandbox, nor will I really pretend to, but sandbox changes happen all the time. At one point in time, Vorpal was the best perk you could have on weapons. They readjusted the values so that it wasn't so dominant in the category anymore, and since then it has essentially been dropped and is useless. The same thing could happen to any of the top tier perks right now, including but not limited to Explosive Light, Bait and Switch, Envious Assassin, Chain Reaction, Ambitious Assassin, and Reconstruction. Second, they could simply release more perks. I may not articulate this point as well as I would like to, but there is no such thing as a quote-unquote perfect perk. There is no such thing as an actual peak to how good a perk is able to be. Most endgame players will, for example, see Bait and Switch on a heavy and generally regard it as the best option. Bait and Switch is a 35% damage buff. However, they could come out with a new perk in the Season 23 dungeon that's a 40% damage buff. Granted, the trigger for that perk actually does matter quite a bit, but if it was as simple as Bait and Switch or Frenzy or Vorpal, it would immediately outclass Bait and Switch, and all of a sudden there would be a huge new surge of weapons to go and grab. Third, and this is one that seems to be repeated all of the time lately, is that the vast majority of players complaining that new loot is not exciting and there's no point in chasing it are players that have already collected almost everything there is to get. These are players that have already put in the time to build up their arsenal. It's not really a game problem, it's more of a player problem. This point really could be a whole video in and of itself, so I'm not really going to dive too deep into that here, but if you all play the game so much that you have everything, that's fine. Play it all you want, but you can't sit here, pump 200 plus hours a season into the game, and then turn around and say there's nothing to do and no good loot, no new good loot to go and get. You've already got it all. Be real here. I refuse to believe that the weapons we have right now are just too strong. The new weapons we are getting simply are not creative enough. They do not push the boundaries enough. They are made to be worse weapons intentionally in an attempt to avoid power creep. Weapon design has largely followed the same general framework. If you played for a while and participated in any sort of endgame content, you already know what I'm about to say. If it has a good reload/ammo perk and a good damage perk, chances are it's a pretty good option. Bungie tends to apply the same cookie cutter formulas to their entire design of the game. Let's break that mold a little bit. We have an origin trait now that spawns in Telesto bolts. We used to have Warmind cells. Let's get some more weapons in the game that spawn objects in and interact with the world in interesting ways. Let's get some weapons that have funky effects. Like, I don't know, maybe makes the floor slippery and enemies slip and slide. I don't know, something fun, right? Let's get some weapons that deal percent damage instead of just flat numbers. Let's just shake up the weapon sandbox with something truly new and unique. Not everything has to be some combination of ammo plus damage setup. You're not really bored with the weapons, you're simply bored of the formula. As always, I appreciate any and all feedback down in the comments. If you made it this far, consider dropping me a sub. I'll make it big one day, and honestly, you kind of want the bragging rights to say you're one of the first, right? I appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.